If only we could encapsulate all these targets into one simple, elegant solution. Well, I think we can. I think that elegant solution is ISO 14001. And I say that because many of you in the room will have CRC issues, and I know there's a standard for things like that. I know there's a standard for emissions. In fact, I know there's a standard for just about everything. One of my concerns for the proliferation of all these standards which are associated with environment is they're picking parts of it. And ultimately, I don't know about you, but I woke up in the environment this morning. And it wasn't where I work. It's to do with everything we do. That standard has existed since 1996 and was upgraded in 2004. It is ISO 14001. And you can include every one of those targets in ISO 14001. You do not need to have BS 16001, 14064, and all the other standards which take apart your environment. You don't need to have them. You can want to have them. But if you had 14001, it would encapsulate your environmental management and environmental impact. It must include all of those things if it's an aspect of what you do. So rather than looking and worrying about all these new targets and all these new standards coming down your way, what I would suggest from today is you can talk to your management team and say, do you know what? If we had 14001, we can encapsulate all this and we focus on just the one thing. Identifying your current environmental impact. In my world, there are three key words. They are measure, test, and monitor. If you don't know where you're starting from, how do you know where you're going to get to? Ultimately, you have to have a reference point from which you're going to make some kind of measurement. And identifying your current environmental position is key. You need to have policy and goals. Otherwise, how is anyone going to know in your team what to do, how to do, and when to do? And you'll see from the case study from 3 Rivers later that simple things like that not only allow you to demonstrate that you can reduce your impact on the environment, not only can it help you reduce your costs, which let's not forget is one of the overall targets, but it actually motivates your team. I'm not saying that. 3 Rivers District Council are saying that, and you can read about it in these case studies. And don't worry if we run out of case studies, because that's how I'm going to get your business cards. It's one of those benefits that they didn't think about going into it. But it's a wonderful benefit to end up with. A more motivated team of people. More involvement, more engagement from the people you work in. It didn't cost them anything, but they informed people what they were doing, when it was going to happen, and showed them how they could get involved. It's nice to be able to say, well, I'll tell you what we do. In my workplace, we've got this program in place. We measure what our CO2 impact is per head, and we have a goal as part of our overall plan to reduce that year on year to meet this standard. Oh, really? That's very specific. Yeah. We can all leave environmental management to somebody else. People do. Or we can say, well, okay, I appreciate that I personally cannot make the change for everybody, but I can do my bit. And if we all do our bit, what a change we can make. Measuring and testing and monitoring starts with the end in mind. To undertake a wholesale review, and don't forget all these slides are going to be available to you at the end, either through the organiser or through us. We need to understand what our aspects and the impacts are. Now, as far as this particular standard, ISO 14001 is concerned, an aspect would be something like, if you're heating your office, you're going to have a boiler somewhere, or you're going to have a big electrical heater. That aspect has an impact. If it's a boiler, it's probably going to be burning fossil fuels. There's that aspect there. The impact will be, when you burn that fossil fuel, where does it go? It goes into the air. Does it go into the water system? Does it go into the ground? What can you do to minimise those aspects? And where do you have responsibility and where do you only have influence? An example. Let's say you have a building that you lease in London, and you identify 10 great ways of improving the environmental impact of that building, your environment. Here's your action plan. I'm your landlord. You come to the landlord and say, landlord, 10 fantastic ways of improving the environment. And the landlord looks through it and goes, do you know what, you've had some good ideas, but this isn't one of them. You're not in control, only influence. So there are some things you'll identify that could be done, you have no control over. This standard recognises that. So defining policy and strategy is important. Having a specific action plan. Specific means it's got to be measurable and time-related. It wouldn't be enough to say we want to improve our environmental impact. What would be acceptable was, we know at the moment we use so much resource per head, and we want to reduce that to this amount by this time. With this standard, that then becomes your measurables, which can be audited. And you're going to have internal audits, and you may decide to have external audits. But there is no requirement of any of these ISO standards for you to have what's known as third-party certification. That's completely up to you. You don't need to have the British Assessment Bureau or others come and give you a certificate. That's only useful if you're going to use it for something. If you need to win a tender where the tender says you have to demonstrate and we're not going to take your word for it, then clearly third-party certification is important.